After going through this video, you will be able to explain different conditional statements, apply different conditional statements in a PHP code. In the previous topic, we discussed that Boolean operators are used to create conditional statements. In this video, we will discuss 4 types of conditional statements. These are if statement, if else statement, if else statement, and switch statement. Let's understand the first conditional statement with the help of this code and see how this is used. Here, we have used the conditional statement, which is followed by the Boolean expression, which is basically the if condition inside the parenthesis. Next, we have the code inside the curly brackets, which will only execute when this condition is true. And when the condition is false, then this code is ignored and the execution continues as such. So, if statements execute some code when one condition is true. The above explanation can also be represented using this flowchart. So, we have the condition here which when true will execute the code inside the if body, and when the condition is false, the code after the if statement will execute as such. Let us look at another example to understand the if statement. In this code, we have assigned the variable a value of 10, and below that we have used the if statement. Here we have the condition that a modulo 2 is equal to 0. This means that 10 divided by 2 should leave a remainder value as 0, which is true. Next, we have the code inside the if body, which will execute only when the condition is true. And in case the condition is false, it will execute this block of code as such. If we look at the output, we can see both the pieces of code are executed. Now, if we change the value of variable a from 10 to 11, what do you think will be the output? Since 11 modulo 2 will give a remainder as 1, this means that the if condition is false. So in the output, we will only see the thank you as the if body code is skipped. Now instead of skipping the if block code, we want to execute some other subsequent code even when the condition is false. For example, we want to print it's an odd number when the condition is false. So for such cases where we want to execute some code block when the condition is false, we use an if-else statement. Let us see how we can use the if-else statement in the code we discussed earlier. Here, after the if statement and the if body code, we will write the else statement followed by the else body code like this. So when we execute this, the first step will be to check whether the if statement is true or false. In case the if statement is true, then the else statement code block will be ignored and it will directly jump to this code block. And in case the if statement is false, then the else statement gets executed followed by this code block. In the output, we can see the else statement is printed as the condition is false along with the code block after the if-else statement. Just like if statements, if-else statements can also be represented using a flowchart. When the condition is true, the code inside the if body will be executed. And when the condition is false, the code inside the else body is executed. Now we can have such cases also where we have more than 2 conditions like a report card, where a student is assigned some grade based on the marks the student has scored. In such cases, do you think the if and if-else statement will work? No, right? To deal with such cases where we have more than 2 conditions, we use the if-else statement. Let us see how we can use this statement using the report card example in this code. Here we have a marks variable to which we have assigned a value 65. Then we have the if condition that if the marks of the student is more than 90, the code will execute and will print excellent. Next we have else if statements which will print different grades based on the conditions associated with them. The else if statements are followed by the else statement. And lastly, we have this code block which will be definitely executed and is independent of the conditional statements used in the code. If we execute the code, we will get the output grade as C followed by the thank you note. Let us understand the logic behind this code. So, when the code is executed, it will first check for the if condition whether it is true or not. Here, the marks of the student is 65, which means the if condition is false and the if body code will be ignored. Next, we will move to the else if condition, which is again false and will be ignored. Similarly, the steps will continue until one of the else if statements is either true or all of them are false. In this case, this else if statement turns out to be true as the marks are more than 60 and less than 70, which means grade C value will be executed and all the remaining code will be ignored, including the else body code. If else statement can be represented using this flowchart. So what happens in case of the if else statement? We have multiple conditions. When a particular condition is true, then the code block associated with it gets executed and all other conditions and their respective code blocks are ignored. So when the first condition is false, the code moves to the next condition and checks whether the value is true or false. No matter how many conditions we have in the code, the execution will happen like this, line by line. Now, coming to the last conditional statement of this topic, that is switch statement. Switch statements are like special if else statements. It looks more organized but has very limited use cases. Like the if else statement, the switch statement is also used to select one out of multiple blocks of code associated with different conditions. But the switch case works only when the expression matches the exact set of values and not on ranges. This limits the use of switch statement. Let us see how a switch statement is used in a code. Here, we have two variables defined a and b with the values 20 and 10 respectively. We also have a variable operator which stores what operation is to be performed on a and b. Next, we have a switch statement that takes a variable and checks its value. We don't have to use any Boolean expression for the conditions. The switch case automatically equates the variable with the case values. Based on the values we are expecting, we put different cases. And depending on which case value the expression matches with, the corresponding code block gets executed. If the expression does not match with any of the case values provided, then this default code block gets executed. Unlike if-else statements, switch statements don't skip other blocks of code by itself. It has a tendency to execute all blocks of code even if it matches the first case value. So, to ensure that no other block of code is executed once the case values are matched, we have to explicitly add a break at the end of each code block. In our code, the operator value matches this case value and will show us the output as 200 along with the text "Thank you." Now, as an exercise, pause the video here and think about what would be the flowchart for this code that uses the switch conditional statement. Hint: the flowchart will be similar to the flowchart used for the if conditional statement. That was all about conditional statements. Up next is a quiz. All the best.